listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast where we introduce you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. Before we jump into this episode, we'd like to give special thanks to POP, peopleofplay.com, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Without them, this podcast would not be possible. Welcome to Hidden Roll, the podcast that introduces you to the brains behind your favorite games. I am artist, engineer, and game inventor David Yakos.
And I'm Branson Faustini.
A honest-to-God time traveler.
That's right. There are lots of podcasts out there that talk about toys and games, reviews, gameplay, and news. But what we want to do is dive into the people behind the toys and games.
Yeah, there's a lot of those questions that I want answered, is like, where did this idea come from? Was it easy? How did this 10-year overnight success happen? And today we've got a really special guest. I'm really thankful to welcome Matthew Lillard. Matt, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. You guys look so natural when you did the whole introduction. Good job, boys.
That's us as engineers and game inventors.
By the way, if Engineers isn't a t-shirt by the end of this pod, then we are not succeeding.
Well, we're striving for success, that's for sure. Well, Matthew, people may know you from some major roles. You star as the live-action character as Shaggy, and also the voice in the animated series, movies like Scream, countless others. Currently, you're starring in Good Girls on NBC.
Right. And Netflix is on Netflix.
And on Netflix. It's awesome. But really what excites us is the amazing RPG experiences you create that you provide through Beadle and Grimm's. And so thanks for being here and giving us a chance to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, because it's so funny to see you hosting. Such a natural host. Look out, Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah. That's what we're doing. So I've known you for a little while here. We probably met about 6-7 years ago, and I've got 4 kids now, and I can't imagine you as a kid. I can kind of imagine it, but what would it have been like to be your parents? Were you a weird kid or what?
Oh, that's so funny. That's not where I thought we would start. I was born a poor child. And well, look, I grew up just in a little town outside of Detroit, Michigan. And then at 10, my mom and dad and my sister and I all moved to Southern California. So I was immediately a kid on the outside looking in. And I grew up in an era, I was born in 1970. I'm 51 years old now. And so I and you, maybe not that old, but.
No, you've got me, Grandpa.
Yeah, I'm old. I'm an old man. It's funny. The more I hang around with people, the older I get. But the idea of being sort of an outsider looking in and being like a new transplant really sort of shaped who I was as a young kid. And then on top of it, I had a severe learning disability. I was obese. My mom and dad were both very, very obese people at that time in their lives. And so, they started their own company, which I think informs the person I am, because my mom and dad, when we moved to Southern California, my dad started his own company. My mom worked for him. And so the inability to or even actually the lack of knowledge around food and what it does to you and how the cheaper it is, the more traumatic it is for the human body. So I was raised on McDonald's and Burger King and all those elements. And so my mom and dad sort of were overweight. We were overweight. And then I was an outsider with a learning disability. So you're that kid who's looking for a place to land. And for me, it revolved around Star Wars action figures when I first started to get into a creative play space. So I would spend hours and hours, days on end playing with a mashup of G.I. Joe and Star Wars action figures. And so in that storytelling in my bedroom, for years upon years, way too many years that I should care to share right now on this pod. But let's just say I could drive and buy my own action figures.
You're not still in their basement. You're not still in their basement, though?
In the what?
You're not living in your parents' basement, though. So
no, I'm okay. This isn't my background. This is my house. So,
okay.
But that place where, I spent a lot of time. It's so funny. I literally have never talked about this in any of the 10 million interviews I've done in my life, but most of my life was spent around telling those stories in my bedroom and playing action figures. And then sometime around the time I was 14 or 15, Dungeons and Dragons was dropped into the zeitgeist. And before the satanic panic of the early 80s, there was this beautiful time when we would play Dungeons and Dragons, and there was, my mom and dad would sort of go to work in the summer, and then I was left on my own at 12, 13 years old until the lights came on, the street lights came on. And so we would, one day we'd go play football. The next day we'd ride our bikes and play, Army Men. The next day we would make a little movie. The next day we'd play Dungeons and Dragons, and then we'd start the cycle all over again. And so, there's a cycle in my life in those years where we would go and play Dungeons and Dragons, and they used to have these little lead figures, that were made of lead in these sort of heroic shapes. And you would go down and you would buy a lead figure, and you'd grab model paint and you'd paint the lead figure. And then you roll up a character based on that lead figure, and you'd play it for like a week until you went and bought another lead figure, and you grabbed new paint and you paint the lead figure. And that was sort of our cycle, right? And that was my introduction to Dungeons and Dragons. That was my introduction to, the guy that we played with, this kid, David Larson, who I haven't talked to. We're Facebook friends now, but I haven't talked to in probably 30 years. Probably more than 30 years. Was this really game-centric kid. So we would play games all the time, and he'd create his own game. And we started sort of a model war game with World War II tanks in his backyard with yardsticks. And so he was doing things was like teaching me sort of the joy of play and the joy of games and strategy and Dungeons and Dragons and imagination. And so I think that's where I started.
That's awesome. Going back to like the idea of learning disability a bit, I've got 4 kids now, and, I grew up awfully dyslexic, or dyslexic as they call it. And, finding these same types of challenges with kids, the labels of like ADD, ADHD, I'm assuming that the brain sometimes just works a little bit different from one person to the next person, and that play experience is like it's like a language that we can actually read. Somebody, like, how did that?
Yeah, it's also like, look, when you're playing games, it's very different than reading American history or a science journal or whatever is put before you. Like, gaming is imagination, and it's enthralling, right? Anytime you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and you're wrapped up in that sort of story, any kind of game, it's about joy. And in joy, your brain will do backflips to adjust and overcome. It's only when we are put to task and learning something we're not interested in do we really struggle that much. I mean, yes, it still could be complicated, but my experience is that, especially with my kids who both have learning differences, how I grew up. Like, if you put me in front of a script, I'll just shred it. But if you put me in front of, an instruction manual on how to run one of your very complicated games, forget it. I'm not doing it.
No, those rules are in German. So
yes, exactly. It's not my strength. But look, I think that, and my learning difference was that the thing that ended up creating the man I am now, right? So where I was horrible at some things, I was off the charts in other things because I had to adapt. And so I was very verbose. I was actually great at reading. So reading wasn't my problem. It was numbers and the translation from sight to audio was like, it just didn't work. So, but everything else in my life came up. So there's there's yin and yang and everything. There's good and bad and sort of all those things. Those elements, those definitions can't define you.
Mm-hmm. So starting like D&D back when wrestling was real, like right when it all started. We'll come back to that, but that somehow must have informed because you ended up acting.
Right.
And I don't see those experiences as too dissimilar, honestly. But what was it that it kind of brought you toward that acting space? How did that happen?
It's funny. So if I back it up, my grandfather was a traveling salesman after World War II. My father, in essence, was a salesman, and both of them have the knack and the ability to be present in any conversation. I think that once I found my first acting class was in 8th grade. Miss Johnson was my first acting teacher. And it was a place where I could be funny and sort of charming and not only not get in trouble, I was rewarded for it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so my first play was I played Darwin J. Doom in Greed for Gold. Was the first play I ever had. And I was really angry that I didn't get chosen to be in the all-star cast, and sort of finding something you're good at and mixing it with like not getting everything you want and being driven to succeed was the sort of that perfect chemistry I needed. And that was it. I mean, I literally, from that point forward, from my freshman year in high school on through high school, I didn't go to college. I was not great at college. That was not who I was. I was defined by one passion. I was defined by acting and sort of chasing it. And the idea of being a successful actor wasn't where I was at, right? I wasn't trying to be famous. There's this sort of belief, especially now with TikTok and sort of social media, there's this thing of like, you're now comparing and looking for life archetypes on social media that you can fit into. And so we didn't have that. So I was just doing what I love time and time again and redoubling, because every time I did it, I loved it more. And so I was just always looking and seeking an opportunity to act, not necessarily to find a career. And it just so happened, like, was I the best actor in the world? Hell no, I was terrible. I was terrible. If you'd put me against kids that have been doing it in New York or LA, like I would have been a laughing stock. But in my little bubble, I was great. And then in my next little bubble, I was better than average. And then my next little bubble, I just kept growing as my skills and talent and passion and love grew. And so by the time I got to New York and studied acting, I was, I had been doing it for a long time. So I had made all those mistakes. There's so much about the creative process, and you guys can speak to this. So much of the creative process is failing. You have to fail. You have to suck to get better. And, I just find like now with young actors, young artists, writers, directors, they're always looking for perfection. They're looking to be successful immediately. And I'm like, don't look to be perfected. Don't look for success. Look to fail. Look to make horrible, horrible mistakes so that you learn. You can't learn until you watch somebody fail or fail yourself.
That's good stuff. Boy, we really got to thank Miss Johnson.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
Miss Johnson.
years later, somebody told me I was playing in the Celebrity Pro-Am Bob Hope golf tournament. And they came up to me on the golf course and said, "I'm Miss Johnson's daughter. She was so proud of you." It's so funny because
that is awesome.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So coming from acting, because you don't slow down. It's a role after role, but you continue to play, D&D, RPG as a pastime, or going from that 12-year-old kid, like you continued to play throughout all this time, or how did that go?
So I discovered girls somewhere around 8th grade. I don't know, something about my life in that time. I left games and really actually got into acting. I mean, that's sort of like where my passion jumped into. And then didn't play again until I was 21 years old when I moved to New York to become sort of to go to school in New York and at an acting school. And my roommate at the time, John Ciccolini, who's one of the partners in the company that we started, he had all these D&D books on his shelf. And as I was looking at his shelf one day, I'm like, dude, why do you have D&D books? He's like, I play. I'm like, do you still play? Oh my God, you're such a dork. You know, these like sort of snap judgments. And I was like, we should play. He's like, so we asked a couple buddies, a guy named Paul Shapiro and a guy named Bill Rayor. And I was like, and a guy named Adam Roth. And like, so we asked a bunch of guys in sort of the, by the way, this is Memory Row from Matthew Lillard. I don't know if I'm doing anything to serve your podcast, but I'm like going down.
This is it.
Great.
Lane. Yeah.
So anyway, so we said, let's play Dungeons and Dragons. And so one day after the Super Bowl, we went from the Super Bowl party. We had keys to the Broadway theater, 50th and Broadway, called Circle in the Square. And in the lobby of this Broadway theater, we played Dungeons and Dragons until like 5 a.m. one morning. And so we've been playing ever since we were 21 years old. I'm 51 now. And it wasn't until about 4 years ago that we started, 5 years ago probably, that we started talking about other things to do with our lives. I mean, all of us had sort of had successful careers. We all had kids. Some of us, or most of us, are still married. One of us is divorced. There's 5 of us that were sort of in this Dungeons and Dragons group that we had played now since we were 21. So, we're dear friends. Fantasy Football League. We're like, all of us are still best friends. And then, my buddy, we were seeking something else in life. We were seeking a new challenge. It was sort of we say it all the time, we were having a midlife crisis. And all of our midlife crisis, because we could never do better than the lives that we have, were based around not sort of blowing up our lives, but what can we add to our lives? And the one thing that we all had in common is we're all storytellers. I mean, we all come from a creative background. There's 5 of us in the company, the 4 that I mentioned, and Charlie Rayor, which is Bill's brother, who was in the military, he was in the Navy, and was a novelist. Mm-hmm. So each one of us had come from a creative background. And so we were seeking something else to do. And we're leaning into that storytelling aspect of our lives. And so we were toying with the idea of, do we do an escape room? Do we do a mystery box company? And like, sort of like, as we were gaming, as we were playing D&D, for about a year, we'd throw around these ideas and just sort of, BS around the table. And one day my buddy Bill called us all and said, I have the idea. He's like, I'd like everyone to come over to my house on Saturday. Let's hang out and I want to pitch it to you. And so we went over to his house on Saturday. We never sort of elevated to that level of like, instead of playing D&D and talking about it, I need you all to come over. So we all went over, and his pitch was super simple. It was like, and he pulled out his Pearl Jam boxed edition. He's like, if you love Pearl Jam, and for the kids at home, Pearl Jam's a band that used to be very popular. He's like, if you love Pearl Jam, you'll download the music, which is on my phone. If the next level of Pearl Jam is this, this vinyl, this record, because you like the liner notes and you like the photos and you like having something tangible. And they said the ultimate fan of Pearl Jam gets this. And he pulled out the box edition of Pearl Jam. And he had actually, funny enough, I directed a movie, and one of the prizes on Kickstarter was this boxed edition of Pearl Jam signed by Mike McCready, who's the lead guitar player of Pearl Jam, who did our music for the movie. So he bought it because he loved Pearl Jam. He said, but he's like, if you're the ultimate fan of Pearl Jam, you get this. He's like, we are going to make the ultimate edition of Dungeons and Dragons. We are going to take everything you need for an incredible gaming experience, and we're going to put it in one box. And sort of that was the beginning of the creation of Beadle and Grimm's.
That is epic. It's nice when you can find your spot where your passion and gifts kind of overlap, that Venn diagram of human life.
Right? It was crazy. Well, I think that, look, the reality is there's a bunch of people you hang out with that have similar sort of passions and loves and all those things. The idea that you would have 5 people hungry enough to make a big change, brave enough to execute and invest in that change, and sort of, the ability to pull it off, those 3 things are you know, that's the sort of lightning, right? I mean, because I think that everyone out there, if you're watching this, like you have an interest in gaming, you have an interest in the creative storytelling. So if you're watching this podcast, you have an idea that's percolating. You're not like, oh, I can't wait to find out how these dice are made. You want to hear about those stories because something inside of you is calling to what you're speaking to. So if there's people out there watching this right now, they have to know that the only thing standing between you and action is saying yes. And it doesn't matter. Like, again, I go back to, you have to fail to find success. So like, if you have a game that's burning inside you, God bless it, just go. Like, what's the worst thing that happens? I mean, you lose money. You're never going to die on your deathbed. On your deathbed, you're never going to pass from this world into the next thinking, I wish I had more money. Right? You're going to be like, or regretting money that you spent chasing a dream. You may regret money spent gambling. I don't know where I'm going with this, but like my whole thing is like, don't live in regret. Like if you have something inside you, for God's sake, go make it. Just make it. Just make it.
There's we talk with a lot of game developers and inventors, and it's like, yeah, I've pitched this one product, 300 times, or it's like there aren't too many overnight successes, but
yes. And by the way, and when you pitch that, you'll learn every single time. And if it doesn't work, it goes on your shelf because it's the cycle will come back around.
They come back.
Yeah.
They come back.
Or you'll reskin it.
What is the name there, Beadle and Grimm? Where's that come from?
Beadle and Grimms are two characters that we played in our game, in our home game. So, at some point we were like, the executive box company, the American box and gaming. Like we were looking for something that people would appeal to people. And the great thing about our company, one of the things I'm super proud of is that we have tried to and have done a really good job to date, touch wood, of creating tone that represents us. Right. Mm-hmm. Even you start at the name. I mean, those are two characters that we played in an adventure for 4 years. Mm-hmm. They were the heroes of Trask. Beadle was my character, which was this dwarven thief who was obsessed with magic. And Grimm was a giant slayer who went from town to town looking for giants to kill who were evil. So, Vodum didn't make the cut and Elrod didn't make the cut. Those are two of the guys who played other characters that didn't make the cut for the names.
Elrod's box.
Yeah, exactly. It just didn't, like Tanner. So anyway, so those are two characters that we played, and we built and it's like Beadle and Grimm's like, what the hell is that? Like nobody has any idea. And now, it's a successful, recognizable name because we've just taken the time to build it.
It's totally starts to enter your world there, Branson.
Yeah, so maybe before we dive in a little bit deeper into Beadle and Grimm's, we could kind of break down Dungeons and Dragons,
sure.
And maybe just role playing for people, because I think last time I checked, I think the stat was 50 million people are playing D&D, or 50 million books sold, or something like that, right? But it's still, I think, for a lot of people, is this abstract thing. It's role playing is
people have a connotation of it, like there's such a negative connotation that's born out of the 70s and 80s, the satanic panic. Like there was this whole world of D&D being typecast, and you can even see it now. I mean, the fact that it was on, it's been on national television recently, featured in a couple TV shows recently have had like Dungeons and Dragons players.
Yeah.
That are, what's the show with the geek guys and Johnny Galecki and
we'll put it in the show notes.
In the notes. It was in Stranger Things. Yeah.
Oh, it's the Stranger Things, right?
Yeah.
But it's in so it's all over the place. And so this idea that, look, Dungeons and Dragons is basically how you pitch it, or how I explain it, is that it's a story that that you launch into. It's a story basically of good and evil, and in general right? You've got anywhere between 3 and 5 players that are on a collective storytelling adventure that can continue for one day or for, longest adventure we ever had was 7 years. And so, as those characters progress, they get more and more powerful. They fight, bigger and more dastardly things in the name of good, or in the name of one adventure, or the name of several adventures along the way. But it's a game that's dictated by a roll of the dice. I'm telling a story, you're telling a story. We come to an intersection, we roll the dice to tell the story of who wins that interaction. That's the simplest way to go. And then, there's been a lot of progression recently in the D&D space where the creation of a thing called D&D Beyond, which allows you to log on and allows you to run your character. Because originally, we're on 5e, we're on 5th edition.
Right.
And first and second and third edition rules were all very rules heavy, was really based on a lot of metrics that looking at the sheet, there's a lot of numbers that make zero sense. Well, with going to 5e, which is the newest edition of Dungeons & Dragons, they created something called D&D Beyond, and you can literally log on to a website that will answer all those questions for you. And as you move your mouse and cursor over that character sheet, it explains everything. So it sort of has taken a lot of the math and the rules out of being prohibitive, broken that down, and made it accessible for everyone.
Yeah. It's like Branson's like our resident dungeon master here.
Right. Do you play?
Oh yeah.
So that's, do you think that's a pretty good sort of explanation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dungeons and Dragons, when you're playing around the table,
right?
That's what it is. I think the big hurdle is the big hurdle telling somebody about D&D is, the complexity of the complexity of how it looks, right? It really isn't. It's really not especially with 5th edition, like you said, it's not quite as rules heavy as the previous ones. But then
around to that point, I think if you're around a table, right, it's much easier to play Settlers of Catan with people who've played before.
Yes.
Because they can explain what the hell's going on. And that's the same thing with Dungeons and Dragons. And if you have a dungeon master, right, there's one person who sort of guides the story, and their ability is sort of and you through the rules part. That's sort of like once you start playing, that sort of goes out of the way and it becomes a storytelling aspect. It's very much a long form improv game.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the other side of it though is role playing, I guess.
Yeah.
Thing, a lot of there's I find that there's kind of not to generalize, but I find that when I'm talking to someone trying to tell them about Dungeons and Dragons, there's the people who are worried about how complex the game is, and then there are the people who are maybe into. Well, there's a third group that's people who are just like, yes, let's go. But then the second group is people who maybe are interested in playing and have played like Warhammer and stuff like that, but aren't really interested in the or they're unsure about their own ability to role play and act as a character. What would you say maybe to those people?
Well, look, I will say this: there is no right way or wrong way to play the game. That's the truth. It's like Beadle and Grimm's. Our whole position is that you do not need our box in any way, shape, or form, or anything we create to enjoy this game. This game has nothing to do with what we do. We build high-end box editions to support a game. Your gameplay is your gameplay. So I think that if you're sitting around a table and you're not interested in role-playing, then you don't have to role-play. If you're sitting around a table and you thrive on role-playing and you love playing in voices and you want to do the orc voice, then have at it. Like, there's just no way, there's no wrong way to do it. Some people are loosey-goosey and like to play silly. My group, we take it deadly seriously. Yes, there's a moment of levity born out of really high emotional stakes, but it's always with the idea of full commitment, in the role-playing, in the action, how we play. Because here's the thing, once you start playing and you get to know your character and you start to fall in love with your character dies, then the game's over. So all of a sudden there's stakes to it, right? If I lose a Monopoly, nobody cares. If if I it depends on how you play Monopoly. Some people, that may be a horrible thing. But if you're playing a character, if I'm playing Beadle, and he dies in a fiery blast, and his body is unresurrectable, like that's the end of the game. Like that character back. So I think that that's one of the great things about the game is this investment in character, the investment in story, the investment in the stakes of the game, the emotional stakes of the game.
Yeah.
Well, and I know you say nobody needs, your box, but when you think about the equipping of like the diving boards that people get for creativity, when suddenly you put a cape on somebody, I put a cape on one of my kids, so they suddenly in their brain can fly. You put a funny pair of glasses on somebody, and suddenly they're a completely different character. Your guys' boxes contain the most amazing. I don't want to call them trinkets. I'd say more like relics. Like there are these things that transport your dining table or wherever you're playing into. You're suddenly in like the 7th layer of hell or wherever you're at, because you have this thing that looks and feels real.
Yeah. Look, our idea is that since the game released in 1974, people have been making props, right? There are people out there that spend time, energy, and have the effort and the ingenuity to create incredible elements to increase the engagement in their games. We are, 5 middle-aged guys who all have some disposable income, and the idea of, and that's, if I was on a desert island and didn't have 3 kids and a wife and a career, now multiple careers, I would love to spend my days crafting a ransom note or crafting, a will. That's just not how I live my life. So if I can, the 5 of us each, our items, so backing up. So we built the company. So we said yes to this moment, and we went to Wizards of the Coast, who owns Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And it was funny. There's this big streaming convention, and I'd been invited up to play in the stream as Matthew Lillard, the actor. And I was like, great, can I bring my 4 buddies? We're all going to stay in, we'll stay in the same hotel, 2 hotel rooms. And we want to come up, we want to play in this game. I'll come up and play in this game. We want to meet the people at Wizards, and we sort of like want to hang out. And we had been building this idea for several weeks about Beadle Grimm's. So we took the opportunity to go up to the streaming event. It was a very tiny little streaming studio. I'll never forget it, because where it's gone to since then, that was 4 years ago, it's like exploded, right? And I literally said to the guy that organized that, I was like, we're going to be at the streaming event in like 10 years, and we're going to remember this tiny little streaming thing, because it's going to grow exponentially, and it has. But at that event, we had all spent like the night before, like saying, how are we going to approach this? How are we going to, Nathan Stewart is the head of the brand. And one of the creators one of the lead storytellers, a guy named Mike Merles. And, they're all kind of hanging out around the streaming event. At one point, Mike Merles and Nathan Stewart are on this corner. And I'm sitting there talking to my buddies. I'm like, I'm going to go pitch the idea. And they're like, no, don't go. I'm like, no, we got to go. We got to do it. And they're like, you're not prepared. You have a mushy mouth. I'm like, So I walked over. I'm like, you guys, thank you for having us. And I was like, hey, I got an idea that I'd like to pitch you. And they're like, whoa, I thought you were just going to be here streaming. It's like this weird sort of moment where I sort of was like, I want to pitch you. It's like every time somebody sees me on the street, like, I have a great movie idea.
You read my script.
Yeah, exactly. So I pitched the idea, and to their credit, they both said, yeah, that sounds really cool. Why don't you, they're like, what's the next step? I'm like, well, why don't we put together a prototype box, and we'll come up and we'll pitch it more thoroughly. And they're like, great. So we, from that day on, worked on the box. Like we worked on this prototype box probably for like 5 months. We built this. We commissioned a dragon scale as like, this is the kind of prop we would make, and we put all these elements together and went up to Washington, and in this meeting with like all these people from Wizards of the Coast, we pitched it. And they said yes. And then, like 6 months later, we were at the next stream. And at that stream, we signed our contract and went live with our first box. So
that's awesome.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah. So in creating the idea, creating the company, we decided to go a route which worked now. And I look back, it was kind of, it worked. It could have really backfired. And we got lucky. We got really lucky. So what happened is that we went out and said, we're going to do 1,000 boxes. We're going to do numbered editions. So we're going to make them highly collectible, very bespoke. And we're only going to make 1,000 of them. And because one of the things I have to say is that our company is run by 5 people who have day jobs still to this day, 3 years later. And part of that allows us to make really bold choices because we're still feeding our families no matter what. And so we launched that at that next stream. And it was funny. The first Reddit review we had is like, this company, Beadle Grimm, is trying to rip us off with a $500 box. That's ridiculous. And I spent like 3 hours like going back and responding to every single post. No, you don't understand. Like trying to articulate what our idea was. And that first stream that we launched at the second stream, and in that stream we had 1,000 boxes. I think we sold like 175. And at that point, because we had no margins, because we were figuring everything out, like we had to sell like 900 of them to make $1. Every mistake, we just threw it like, oh well, screw it, onward, because we had to deliver a box. And D&D Beyond, which was this guy who ran it named Adam Bradford, who's gone now from that company. But he was like, I was like, is anything you can do to help us? Because we're running up against this. We're not moving units. We had no name recognition. I would tweet about it. If I tweet a picture of me and Skeet in Scream, I'll get 50 million retweets. If I, to this day, tweet something about Dungeons and Dragons, it's like 18 people and my mom is like the top. So I was like, we wildly underestimated sort of the idea that people would immediately accept it. We underestimated the idea the price point was really high for people, and it was, and we knew that. And our pitch was like, if everyone around your table pitches in, it's not that expensive. It's actually less than the pizza you'll buy every single time you play, because our game box is designed that every time you play, there's a touch, right? So every time it's elevating your game. Over the course of 10 years, that's a lot of touches. That's not that much money if you amortize it out. But sorry, I'm blithering. Am I screwing this whole thing up?
This is the
great.
exact thing we wanted to hear. Like this is now, we've brought games to the market, and we've been hearing the stories from many people that have brought games, toys, play experiences to the market. And honestly, one of those pivotal moments that is really the crux is that pitch, and you with your mushy mouth going up in all of your boldness, not afraid to fail, just seizing that opportunity. What a moment.
Yeah.
That importance of the pitch, I would say that you hit a little bit of a lottery hitting. A lot of times it's, I've got to pitch this thing 50 or 100 times, and then that one's I'm going to go put on the shelf. I'm going to pitch the next one, and before you finally hit it. But
and by the way, if the pitch doesn't work, it goes away. The company goes. I don't know if the company. Right now we're still. We would have built an escape room in the middle of Pacoima, and nobody ever goes. You know what I mean? It's like, where would we have gone? The energy was going to go somewhere. So we got lucky.
Nice.
So, what goes into what went into making that first prototype? You got to be sitting there thinking like, what is great for a player? What is going to be that special moment for a player? They get this letter, they get this physical prop or whatever, but also you got to be thinking like, what is great for the DM? What's going to let the DM makes the campaign something special, right?
Yeah.
What went into that? What kind of thought went into that?
Sure. Well, the good news is that we had all played our whole lives, right? I mean, starting at the first box and all the way through. except for some of us took a break in high school. We had played, so we could approach it from both sides. Our sort of the reason that our North Star as a company is how do we elevate the storytelling experience for everyone around the table? How do we make it easier for the DM, and how can we improve the storytelling? And so we built everything from that point of view. Like what we felt was important was those pieces. And then we go back to touches, like how many times, if you make something awesome, but it only plays one time in an adventure that takes 10 years, then it shouldn't be in the box. And that's sort of how we started. And now, look, as the company's progressed, we launched with these sort of platinum editions with the idea that we would eventually in success come back and build elements for everyone around the table. And more importantly, build items that were far more affordable. And so, we now have gone from $100 element to 180 is what we just, we're releasing a box right now for $180, right. to the max price of $500. And then pulling elements out of that box to sell individually for $20. So if you're identifying with, a certain faction that you found in this game, well, you can buy this badge that, we make. I mean, that's the thing is like, the time, energy, and effort that you don't have, we do. And then we take a year to make resources that you couldn't make if you wanted to, unless you had a foundry, right?
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, we're doing these, and then we find over the last 3 years, we've found incredible artists. Like just sort of like, hey, in our world, the way we approach is like, here's our thought. Our creative process is like, we want you to go make this exciting for you. Because if it's exciting for you, it's going to be exciting for us. So we try to give our artists a lot of leeway. We try to, keep inspiring them to push themselves to do stuff that's different and sort of outside their box and reach. I mean, we do there's a moment in Descent from Avernus. I actually think I have it. So I run all of our physical production. So I'm sort of the person that gets stuff made. So I'm seeing if we have, like, this is one of the first things we did. So on the front of our first box, this is the Stone of Glore. So this actually attached to the front of the box, which is like this little magnets behind. But before this moment, we had no idea how to do any of this stuff. But like, for example,
that's a killer touch. Just like having those eyes looking at you on the outside of a paper, on the outside of a box, like giving it that dimensionality.
Right.
It reminds me almost of like that Harry Potter spell book of monsters that just comes alive when you eat.
I thought I had a soul coin here. We have these big soul coins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. In the 3 dimension, there's a face coming out the other side. But like these elements, like you're doing, there's like a dragon token that has very little to do with the actual gameplay, but you can sort of see it. There's like the face is here and it kind of coils around like that. That's just to move. We did this big map and where the dragon appears and where the dragon is on the map. We created this token just to put on your table because it was cool.
I want to put that on a belt. That looks like the best belt buckle I've ever seen.
Oh my God.
Yes,
let's be the greatest idea ever. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, the thing is, look, and we're still building a company right now. We are led by the idea of what's cool.
That is fun. I love that we got to hear the from the beginning, like what has made you into the creative you are. Like, because as far as a creative like fountain of youth, like I don't know too many people that live like you do. And just hearing that backstory and everything and the things that speak into it are awesome. But before we do go, I did want to play a little quick thing with you.
Oh yeah, okay, good.
What we do have is a hidden roll die, and Branson's going to be your hands today and roll this for you. But what we've got, just to set a little scenario, we've got some icons on this die, and you are now face to face with a foe. This is like your mortal enemy. And you're just going to be given an icon, and I just want some sort of short response based on whatever scenario you're given. And you can give yourself any character you desire and any enemy you desire. You can change it up. But just being a man of many characters and voices, I'm just going to leave it to you.
Okay. And you're going to read what's in front of me?
I will go ahead and give you the scenario of what happens, but you're basically right now just face to face with a deadly foe, whatever character you are.
Okay.
And we've got some different icons in here that stand for different things.
Okay, good. Okay.
And so let's go ahead and give that a roll and see where we start with here.
I'm in front of this character right here, my belt buckle. My
Oh, yeah, okay. Your belt buckle.
Yeah.
The dragon.
Yeah. Chandelier.
Oh, and we ended up with some crossbow. Was it the
Turns out it's a pirate world.
Oh yeah, turns out you're stuck in a pirate world. You got the crossbones, the skull and crossbones. So
Okay.
sorry, but you're stuck in a pirate world.
Okay. And so now I'm supposed to tell you how I get out of it?
Yeah, you just go ahead and you're talking to your dragon, your belt buckle.
Okay. Shiver me timbers. Look at here, dragon. In me pocket, I have one golden ring. It has 3 wishes. I will happily give you this ring for the life of me and my entire crew. You can trust me. I guarantee it. For I am not a pirate. I am the chaplain of this pirate ship. I'm the only one with the heart of gold.
We'll
And
see if you
then
can.
hand out the ring, right? And the dragon, of course, you're gonna roll. I'm gonna roll this. This is a death save.
Oh,
So-
yeah.
This
Glorious.
is a death save dice. It weighs more than my head. So I'm gonna roll it. So if the dragon accepts my token of bartering, then we and the entire ship, the Crimson Branson. Branson. It's your name's Branson.
It's Branson.
The Crimson Branson. If it does not, we will be hit with an ice blast and all perish. Are you ready? And it's a critical success. We and the Crimson
Nice.
Branson
Kapow!
to pillage the seas.
Not icicles today.
No icicles for me.
All right, let's do one more. That was fun.
Okay.
You got stuck in pirate world.
Okay.
Sorry about that. One more. What do we got? Give us a roll. Give us a roll. Oh my gosh. We've got yourselves the broken heart.
Okay.
Yeah, you're just about to land a mortal blow when suddenly something different happens. Yeah,
I'm about to strike a mortal blow on somebody else.
not on this dragon, but suddenly there's some sort of you've got some sort of heartfelt reaction. What might that be?
Okay. So as the Crimson Branson is leaving port, this chaplain, the Shiver Me Timbers, this captain, who is not really a chaplain, he's really the second mate, looks back and sees the Charlatan dragon approach the next ship. And he knows that his own daughter is about to take off on her maiden voyage of her own, the Crimson Yakos, sister ship to the Crimson Branson. And he sees, in fact, the Charlatan dragon start to approach. And he could see the fear in his own daughter's eyes. And in a moment, he takes off his scabbard, kicks his boots free, and dives off the back of the ship and starts swimming back towards the Crimson Yankos. And as he does, as the bartering is happening, this dragon which has appeared out of the deep mooring sea, he climbs to the back of the dragon, up the back of the dragon. He whispers in the ear of this dragon, says, dragon, if you let the Crimson Yakos go free, I shall ride as your second mate forevermore, and I will negotiate every single deal that stands before you, so you never again have to blow your icy wind on those that stand before you. And in consideration, we roll the dice. If he accepts that the bartering, then our second mate will travel forevermore as the right hand of the Charlatan dragon.
And I won't have to blow the icy wind.
It is not. There is an icy wind for all of the above. He sinks the Yakos, he devours the second mate, and he makes his way after the Crimson Branson. Oh, this is a big roll. So let's go 2 out of 3. All right. Critical success.
Boom.
Nice.
All right. One more.
This thing's weighted.
Critical success. It is
nice.
It has been said by the dice.
This dice that weighs more than your head is definitely weighted toward our favor.
I don't even know if it can roll a failure.
Not today. Not today. Hey, this has just been a pleasure diving in with you and getting the stories that make it all real. Where's the best place for people to find or follow you and follow, I guess,
Beadle
Grimm's.
Yeah, Beadle Grimm's at beadlegrims.com. I'm Matthew Lillard. I'm on MatthewLillard.com. Or no, I'm not at MatthewLillard.com. I'm at like all things Twitter is Matthew Lillard. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram at Matthew Lillard. It's not that hard to find me. And thank you. I know I talked a lot. For some reason, I thought we were going on for 7 hours. I just talked so much.
Oh no, we'll have to do this again. But it has been a pleasure, and maybe one of these times we'll be around the table, and when we are around the table, please bring that die for all of my battles.
Nothing could ever go wrong.
This has been Hidden Roll, the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. If you like what we're doing, the best way that you can support us is to like, thumbs up, comment, or leave a review and share us with your favorite brains. Follow Hidden Roll Podcast anywhere that podcasts can be found. If you want to see our beautiful faces, all of our content is also available to watch on YouTube. If you know of someone who would be a great fit to appear in our podcast, or if you'd like to learn the story behind any toy or game, let us know on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or send us an inquiry at www.hiddenrollpodcast.com/suggestions. That's Hidden Roll, ROLE, podcast.com. Once again, special thanks to Pop, People of Play, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Visit www.peopleofplay.com to learn more. This podcast is also made possible by the continued support of the brains who never grew up, inventors of play, Streamline Design. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.